Welcome to the first annual Gaily Show Awards. Here is your host, J.P. Derbagosian.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever Gaily Show Awards, or the Gailies. As the world is coming to an end, we gather together in the time-honored gay tradition of the awards show. Well, we gather virtually, first on the radio waves, and then everywhere you get your podcasts, as well as on our YouTube channel. We are here to celebrate this past year's queer creativity, queer craftspersonship, and sheer queer audacity in TV, film, books, and poetry. Today, we celebrate queer literature. Like all of the very best award shows, the Gailies, however, are about suspense. So we won't tell you what the categories are ahead of time or the honorees, much like MAGA doesn't tell you how a tariff works. Instead, a guest judge in each industry is selected by me to evaluate the year that was and create the categories and or honorees to celebrate our queer creatives. Our guest judge today is Patrick Nathan. Patrick is the author of Image Control, Social Media, Fascism, and the Dismantling of Democracy. Add that to your reading list for sure. And Some Hell. Earlier this year, his new novel, The Future Was Color, was the Los Angeles Review of Books Book of the Summer. Please welcome Patrick Nathan.
Hello. Thank you for having me on, the the last, little broadcast of what may be our little civilization that we have going on here. Yeah.
Just, little civilization. Just saying goodbye to it.
Just,
if we got to go out in style.
They come and go, talking of, Michelangelo and all that, so it's fine.
Well, thank you for being our guest judge today, reviewing the year that was in queer literature. So you have a list of honorees that you want to bestow a Gaily upon. So shall we start with the first book?
Yeah, so I have, a little list here that's incredibly lopsided in terms of most of them are just novels because that's what I tend to like the most. I realized I didn't have any poetry on the list, mostly because I think I realized I didn't know how to read poetry this year. Every time I picked it up, it just didn't work. So I have a bunch of novels, and then I have one biography.
Well, lucky for you. Well, yes. Lucky you're our guest judge, and lucky for you, we have Maya Williams coming up here in a couple weeks, who is a poet laureate of the city of Portland, Maine. So she's got poetry covered for you.
Then I am absolved of guilt. So, yeah, let's talk about, I guess the first queer book that I read of the year was Garrett Conley's All the World Beside. Garrett wrote Boy Erased, which was, made into a wonderful movie with Nicole Kidman and some other people. But the book is also very good. So I was very excited when he announced, this was, years and years ago. He was like, I'm writing this novel.
It was years ago.
It was years ago. And so finally it came out, and it's about two Puritan men living in early colonial America who have a years-long fling. It's very wonderfully written. It's very evocative and, horny and all the usual great things. And kind of undersung. It kind of came, and not a lot of people paid a lot of attention to it, unfortunately. But I think it's wonderful. Yeah, did you read this one at all?
I have to say the list of honorees is all going to go on my book list, and that I haven't read any of them yet, which is very depressing. I mean, I've been reading, obviously, but usually books related to the show.
You read my book, so that's good.
Yes.
That's the important.
I guess that's the only one that counts, right?
That's the one that counts, in my opinion. So yeah, I also read. So in I don't know, 2020, 2021, something like that. I ended up having the honor, I suppose, of reviewing a debut novel for the New York Times called The Recent East by Thomas Grattan. And he came out with another novel this year called In Tongues, which, as horrifying as this is to say, is historical fiction because it takes place in the year 2000 in New York. A Minnesotan gay man moves to New York and through kind of a little bit of some mishaps in the first 20 pages or so, ends up becoming a dog walker, and through his dog walking gig meets this, homosexual power couple who are into art, and they kind of have a lot of money to throw around, and they end up deciding that he's going to be their servant. Assistant, but servant. And he inserts himself into their relationship, and it just kind of gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And it's just a really wonderful novel that is constantly swerving in directions you don't anticipate it going, which is one of my favorite reading experiences, is when you, as the reader, you can't really see beyond the headlights of the car. And it's great. I loved it.
Okay. All right.
And, what else? This is, I feel like I'm just, this is the best kind of award show when you just get up and talk about whatever you liked. I also read...
Well, you're explaining why you like them and your criteria,
that's true,
so that's very good.
It's not just, bestowing a little wave of the wand.
And it's the Gaily Show Awards, which are entirely subjective.
Exactly.
And deliberately so.
And I am currently the subject. So let's... I also really loved Hombrecito, the debut by Santiago Jose Sanchez, and thought it was... when I was reading this one, I was kind of like... when you start reading a book and you think, I know how this is, I know how it goes, or whatever, and then something happens in the book, and you're kind of like... oh, wow, I didn't expect that. And then it just kind of keeps doing that to you. I think I'm repeating exactly what I said about In Tongues, but I guess you can get a sense of what kind of books I like. But it kept reinventing itself as it went. And initially the book was kind of born out of several linked stories that they were working on in their MFA program, and kind of coalesced into this very strange, singular novel.
So it is a novel of short stories interlinked, or it became
I'd say it became a novel,
Okay.
Like, I don't know how this is grandiose, but I'm going to steal something that I used to hear in the opening, video of a video game that I used to play in the 90s. It coalesced the way that a few shacks along the river Tiber became Rome.
Well then.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway. And I don't know. It's great. Came out the same month that my book did, and we didn't even fight about it. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I also, so here's the nonfiction pick. In I think March, the Keith Haring biography by Brad Gooch came out, called Radiant, and I kind of had read this as a little bit of a homework assignment because there was the Haring show here at the Walker in Minneapolis, and
it was amazing.
So I was like, I want to know what the hell I'm dealing with here. So I read this book, and I, like any biography, it plunges you into a long gone, New York art world that, and Madonna's in it, Basquiat, of course, is in it, Warhol's all over it. You get the familiar cast of characters, and really it deepened my understanding, I think, of what he was trying to do, and also the seriousness with which he approached what he did, but also the kind of the quality of almost public service. And this is how he, very much got into the mural world. Yeah. He did, tons and tons of murals. He very much thought art could change people's minds. He thought it could make make an impact. And in a lot of ways, he was right. In a lot of ways, he was also very susceptible to the more consumerist aspects of that as well. Hence why the the one herring that I own is a t-shirt. And that is probably true of most people listening to this program. But yeah, it was great. And it added a lot to the show. I turned into a little mini docent with my friend group that we went to the museum. And I was kind of like, well, this is the point in his life when, and they let me get away with it.
Well, that must be a good biography, because some of them can be stuffy. And just a litany of dates and these things happen. So if it was good enough for you to be a docent at a really rather lovely exhibit of his work, that must be good.
I mean, and here's maybe a little bit of a moment to throw some shade, I suppose. I just tried reading the new biography of Mondrian that came out, and it was very much kind of that like litany, like line by line, like he grew up in a house with geometric patterns on the windows, and this would one day influence his paintings, and the position of the staircase in the house mimicked his understanding of like geometry. And I was just like, no thanks, I want a biography that was written by somebody who actually has a feel for sentences. That's kind of the number one rule of reading anything. And if you can't get a feel for the sentences, then I don't understand what you're even doing with a book. It just doesn't make sense to me.
And this is how you end up on the good list.
Yeah, we'll see. There's still many ways to get off of it. So one of my favorites of the year, and I've talked about this one, I think, a couple times in different podcasts and interviews and such. Emma Copley Eisenberg wrote, I think it's her debut novel. She has another book, but this is the debut novel, Housemates. And it's one of those that almost kind of escaped my radar just because it's, described as queer road trip novel. Two queer roommates end up kind of going on a road trip, and I was kind of like, but I read it, and within the first few pages, it just totally had me. A friend once told me this before. He was like, I was like plop. I was in the story, and it definitely it's a plop kind of book. It just really pulls you in right away, and it's formally experimental. It's wonderfully paced. It's beautifully written. It has incredibly complex and memorable characters. It has almost essayistic interjections about art history. It's got lots of theories going on in it, but none of it is done in a way that's jarring. It's all very accessible, and it just works. And I could not stop reading it. It was so wonderful. Yeah, I wish more people would buy it. Although it's doing pretty well.
I'm glad to hear that. That's part of what we're hoping to do here, is to get these works out and get people buying them for the holidays. For yourself, mainly, at this point.
And, by the way, if you were to buy any of these books at Subtext Books in St. Paul, I work there, and that would be great for me. And
you ship.
We do ship. Yes, that is correct. If you just go to subtextbooks.com and order whatever you want, we'll ship it to you and put a little bookmark inside and write "thank you" on the bookmark, and it'll be really cute. Another book that I really enjoyed, and this was kind of this is very much a bathtub book. Not in a, I don't mean that in any kind of derisive way, but it's just it's a great cover to cover read in the bath. It goes so fast. and it's so marvelous and so suspenseful. It was Rumaan Alam's Entitlement, which is his fourth novel, I think. And he wrote Leave the World Behind, which was recently made into a movie with Julia Roberts and scared the bejesus out of me. And the book is really scary too, but Entitlement is not terrifying. It does not have people's teeth falling out. It's a book about a woman who gets kind of wrapped up in a billionaire's philanthropy, money laundering kind of organization, and she thinks that she's going to be his protege, essentially. And that kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding leads to a pretty fantastic climax. And yeah, again, you'll read it in one sitting because you won't want to stop reading it. Another book that I knew I was going to like it, because I've liked all his work, but it felt like an evolution of his work, which is Small Rain by Garth Greenwell. Greenwell wrote What Belongs to You in 2016, which, was a really big book at the time, and I ended up writing about it in an essay that, of course, since embarrasses me because it's so old, but it's great. And then he wrote Cleanness in, I think, 2019, which was kind of a continuation of the themes of What Belongs to You, but in a kind of a different musical key, basically. And then ended up writing this new book, which is based on an experience he had in the hospital, where basically a poet and professor is suddenly in just intolerable, unspeakable pain and is sent to the hospital, where doctors fawn over him for, I think it's 10 days in the book. And they don't know what's wrong with him, but they're kind of fascinated by it. And he's essentially confined to a bed, and in bed is kind of reflecting a lot on care and, of course, art and love. And this is set during the pandemic, so he feels like he's even more cut off from people than before. And it's very much a book about kind of examining different registers to live in, or different tones to live in, and very much getting away from the idea of living being transactional. And it just surprised me, and it was wonderful to read and very moving. And as I told him, because I ended up interviewing him, I said, I feel like, you've always been a really great stylist, but I feel like this is the book that rose to your style. And wow. It's just, it's marvelous. And of course, I'm not exactly terribly original in noticing this. It's on all the, best books of the year, and then 100 notable this and the 10 best that and whatever. So yeah, he's doing fine. But it's really wonderful. And I think it's written in fairly long paragraphs, which I think tends to scare people away, but it's very readable. It's very, what's the word? It's very breezy for something that's kind of long, and, well, the book isn't that long, but for something that kind of wanders around itself. It's very breezy. It's kind of like the bad reputation that Proust gets for being, purple prosy or whatever, but really Proust is actually very conversational. It's just 4,000 pages of it. And anyway, the book that really stood out to me, though, and I wish, again, more people were reading, is a very, very indie novel by a Wisconsin writer named Nate Lippens, who wrote a book, many years ago called My Dead Book, and now has kind of it's almost continuation of the same consciousness, but not necessarily a sequel. It's just kind of picking up in the universe that he left off in, and it's called Ripcord. And I mean, the first sentence is, I think I can say this on the radio. Mm-hmm. The first sentence is, "Some people get the glory, some people get the glory hole." And it's just this extremely sharp, acerbic, kind of, I don't know, just it's someone at the end of their rope, but they know that they can make more rope, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And they will just keep going and keep going and keep going, even though they're broke, even though their friends are dying, even though there's, not really any hope of things ever changing. It's just, it's funny, it's cutting, it's sharp, it's profound. You're going to underline like tons of it. It's one of those books where if you're reading it in a room with someone, you're going to be like, "Hey, listen to this." It's great. And I don't know. I'm so glad it came into my life.
Wow. Well, there it is.
Any questions?
There it is. No, I think that this has been really, really thoughtful, well-reasoned, if that's a way of saying it. And I think this is an excellent list for folks. Let's read them again. So, In Tongues by Thomas Grattan, Housemates, Emma Copley Eisenberg, Hombrecito, Santiago Jose Sanchez, All the World Beside, Jared Conley. Garrett Conley. I do that every time. Sorry, Garrett. Entitlement, Ruman Alam. Radiant by Brad Gooch. Small Rain by Garth Greenwell. And Ripcord by Nate Lippens. And we must talk about, if I were to have a category in this genre, I would say most likely to be a HBO Max miniseries. We're going to manifest that for this particular novel, which
if you can
The Future Was
really
Color.
Hard. If you can manifest really hard, that would be great. I looked at my bank balance earlier, and my bank balance would also like you to manifest this for me.
Okay, we're going to make this. We're going to make this a reality. Your novel, Patrick, was a Los Angeles Book Review Book of the Summer for a reason, and it is very. I don't want to say necessarily cinematic, because that would obviously mean turn it into a film. But the way that the way that it plays out, and why I would want it to be, hope we'll see a series about it, is just how each section could be just so beautifully explored in multiple episodes. And it is such a delight of an exploration of also, as a grandson and great-grandson of genocide survivors, and your main character is Jewish and, Armenian, so not exactly the same situation, but the exploration of the themes of diaspora, of survival, of assimilation are absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on in this novel. And then to get to LA, and I can't remember if you've lived in LA or not. I lived in Los Angeles for 3 years, and so you're on this, it's this weird, you're at the end of the world, West Coast, it feels like there's nothing left, in terms of civilization. It's basically Hawaii after that. And so even that kind of experience, and then, there's the way that you surprisingly, shockingly chose to end the novel with an image that is very hard for me to get out of my head. But it was that would be my category of award for you.
Thank you.
And yeah.
For anyone who is not familiar, it's a novel about a Hungarian emigre writing monster movies in 1950s Hollywood who gets kind of mixed up with the wrong people via a famous but sort of washed up actress who decides to take him on as her project without really telling him why she wants him around.
If you like Turner Classic Movies, you will love this novel. If you like monster movies from the 50s, you will like this novel. If you like queer historical fiction, an exploration of what queer life could be in, the writing bungalows on a studio lot in the 50s, you are going to like this novel. If you just like queer fiction in general, you will like this novel.
I feel like the New York art world's got that too.
Yes.
It's also got lots of good sex. So,
also true.
It's stuffed, as it were.
Wow. There it is. Well, how can folks connect with you if you would like for them to connect with you in the end times?
Yeah. So, right now I am mostly on Substack. I am writing a weekly newsletter called Entertainment Weekly, but it's weekly with an A. And that's probably the place where I'm the most active right now because it's the place where I'm actually making some money. But otherwise, patricknathan.com is a pretty reliable place to start.
Perfect. And I think that there needs to be some revisitation as well of your book, Some Hell. Image Control. Image Control.
Yeah, which I make the case that social media opened the door to Trumpism and collapsed democracy. And you know what? It doesn't feel very good to be right.
On that particular issue, I can see why, but I think that folks need to be reading it in a sense of the response that will need to happen over the next forever, not even just 4 years, forever.
I think if I can just say that one of the important things that I really want people to take away from reading a book like that is how a lot of the choices that we make on a day-to-day basis do involve agency, and a lot of what we kind of give our time to is engaging in a pretty extraordinary passivity. And I caution people who are using social media to engage in a kind of spectatorship of activism to really think about, is this activism or is this disempowerment?
Excellent question that everyone needs to be asking themselves right now. Patrick Nathan, thank you for being our first guest judge of the Gaily Show Awards Queer Literature Edition episode. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you.
Folks, tune in next week. We will continue the Gaily Show Awards with film. Our guest judge will be Charles Jensen. You can watch our previous episodes on our YouTube channel and everywhere that you get your podcasts. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you, queers and allies, in the bookstores.